Welcome to another edition of Liberated Perspectives. I'm one of your many hosts. My name is Solomon, and you're watching UNI TV on the Nibiru Media Collective. And if my co-hosts could introduce themselves, and we'll get started. Ms. Jacobs,
Oh, hello, I'm Jolita.
Ms. Somerville, Dara,
Hello, I'm Dara. I'm a media and digital communications major, ready to talk about this or have this conversation.
right on. Jasmine,
Hi, I'm Jasmine. I'm a first year here at UMD. I'm also excited.
right on. Elizabeth,
Hi, I'm Elizabeth. I'm doing meteorology and I'm ready to talk about how freaking flawed the electoral system is.
right on, right on. And so that's a good segue. This episode, our focus is on um, the United States electoral system. Pros, cons, the flaws, as Elizabeth mentioned, there's numerous flaws with the system. I mean, the electoral college in and of itself is a very, very flawed system, very unequal and presents a lot of challenges for a lot of people that are, part of the so-called electorate. Um, but then also the influence that corporate money has on elections here in the United States that you don't see in a lot of other Western countries. If you go to Scandinavia, there are rules that are set up. You can't literally buy elections. You cannot, corporations don't have the same influence where they have just unfettered access to politicians and political parties by pouring in, literally if they want millions and millions, or in this case, United States, with the passage of Citizens United, several years ago, you could pump in $1 billion behind a candidate or um, a political party, and it presents a lot of significant challenges. And so, with that, I'm going to full stop, and I'll turn it over to you guys and Jasmine. In a lot of ways, organically, when last week when we were in our production room and we were discussing what would be the topic of this show. You kind of spearheaded it, and I'm glad you did. It sparked a lot of conversation in that, and so I want to know if you can kind of get us started.
Yeah, so last week while we were planning for the production of this meeting, I kind of offhandedly mentioned that I had studied abroad in another country. I studied abroad in Spain, and at the time I went, it was an election year. They were electing like their new I guess dominant parliamentary party. And so for me, it was definitely an interesting experience because although I don't know a lot about Spain politics, my host family would always have the TV on and I would always be able to see like the different parties. And so they are more of, I guess you would say, like a pluralistic democracy in the sense that they have several viable parties that can be elected for seats in parliament. Whereas in the United States, it's a two-party system and like we don't really see independent candidates that run for president thriving, and then there are even independent candidates in Congress are like unicorns. So being able to go to Spain and see like how their government is run and like how their Congress is built of so many different parties was definitely a cool experience, and it made me question what happens in the United States because it showed me a model that like it doesn't have to be like this.
Right on, right on. I appreciate that. Dara or Cholita or Elizabeth.
Okay, well, I wanted to kind of focus on like early voting history and things like that when having this conversation. Even setting the precedent that knowing that when you become of age to vote, whether that's for, locally or for the president, you're not actually, or if we're talking about the presidential voting, you're not actually voting for your president. I mean, you are, but there's a lot of leeway in between. You don't have a direct vote because of the all their electoral votes and stuff. And even when talking about history, I know our focus isn't like right now Black history, But when we talk about Black history and early voting, it was like after the Civil War that Black men were legally granted the right to vote, but there was a whole bunch of conversation because technically the amendment stated that you aren't able to be denied because of your race, color, or any previous conditions, but there was a lot of tactics that held back our community from voting. So they enforced a whole bunch of poll taxes and they enforced like literacy tests and a lot of tests that didn't even have anything to do with voting, just for our voice not to be heard. And then they had the grandfather clause, which was problematic because that allowed white voters to like bypass restrictions. And there was a whole lot of violence that pertained to voting for us. So I just want to bring that perspective in first.
No problem. Appreciate it. Appreciate it.
And I would like to like touch on what she was saying, like about the white voters kind of like take a majority or just taking a lead, if that makes sense when it comes to like voting, and how like we talked about this last time about just how like sometimes that's very discouraging, especially for like I'll say, I can say like for the black community, like I know that there's a lot of, not a lot, but there's some black people that choose not to vote because they feel like their voice won't be heard because of the way that the system is
Yeah.
and how it's like, how it's just set up. And I was doing some research and, because I wanted to learn more about the difference between like the Electoral College and then the national popular votes, like how they do that. And it kind of just gave me a better perspective of how like with the Hillary Clinton and like with the Trump situation, how Hillary won most of the national votes, which are like the votes from all America combined, whereas in Donald Trump, he won just like they tallied his up by like the points from each state, which kind of made him win when it really wasn't like that really wasn't the case. And I was thinking of maybe a possible like solution to that could be doing the national popular vote, which will let everyone be able to like equally vote for whoever they want and not have the swinging states be the majority of like what takes everybody's vote away, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I also agree with that. I mean, obviously, like I'm not a poli-sci major. I don't know everything, but I'm kind of still racking my brain on why the Electoral Party still exists.
Yeah.
I understand that when the United States was first formed, they wanted to protect small states, but I feel like now it's just like the smaller states are kind of disproportionately represented. Like the math doesn't math is the best way to put it. Like especially if you compare like the electoral votes per population of smaller states versus the larger states, there's obviously a gap. So I do agree. And I also feel like in, I guess, protecting small states, it's kind of isolating voters within states. Like it's the whole like, what about Republicans in California or whatever, like Democrats in Texas? So I think that, yeah, being able to just have your vote directly go toward a candidate, I feel like in our climate makes sense because I think the power the swing states have and the way candidates are only pandering to them doesn't really make any sense.
Yeah. Can I say something, Jasmine? I think one of the you said something initially just now. You said I'm not a poli sci major, political science major. You don't actually have to be. I think that gives you certain advantages. So I just give this example. Like years ago, I interviewed Dr. Richard Wolff, who was one of the great economists of our time. He's a professor emeritus. He teaches at the New School. I think he's also at UMass Amherst. But his point that he made is that he said he went to the best schools, right? He did his undergrad, Ivy League. He went to Stanford and then did his PhD, Ivy League as well. I think it was like Yale, Harvard, and Stanford are three schools that he went to. And he said in all those schools, all I learned how to do was to be a great capitalist. That's all they taught. They didn't teach alternative economic systems or anything like that. So he said, so when I started to, the reason why I know so much about socialism now as a viable alternative to to capitalism, why I'm able to critique capitalism in the way that I am is because I had to step outside the box. They don't want you inside the box. And so even political science in this country, right? Like you have a unique perspective, all of you do. The fact that you're independent critical thinkers and you're looking at things from outside of the proverbial box, where people here in this country, whether they're poli-sci majors or just general, like just everyday, Americans, they've been taught that this is the system and embrace the system, and it's rarely taught in any way that it's flawed, right? That you don't have a lot of corporate media shows addressing what we're addressing today. They don't have topics um, critiquing the vast flaws in the electoral system here in the United States because they by and large they benefit from that, especially when you look at the limited debates, right? It's always one of the two candidates from those two political parties. So I just wanted to say you have a unique position, like perspective, all of you. Um, the fact that you're able to see it from the outside in, and that the more studying that you do, because you're going to embrace and you're going to come across books that typically, if you were a poli-sci major, typically wouldn't be prescribed to you in the beginning of the semester syllabus. You're looking at things and reading articles and analyzing things from the outside to kind of weigh the pros and cons from the back. So I just wanted to say, like, I think that's actually a benefit in a lot of ways. Not that there's not a place for expertise within. Of course there is. There's definitely, but it as with Richard Wolff, it weighs so much more if students, whether they're college students or grad students or just even middle school or high school students, they're given a balance, right? You're given this, but then you're also able to look at alternatives to this system. Like how great of a doctor might you become if not only did you get the Western medicine, which there's a place for, but also if you start to get information about naturopathic medicine and homeopathic medicine. So if this medicinal, drug that you're giving one of your patients, it has some really bad, adverse effects or something like that, and you're able to introduce them to some herbal remedies, for basic things. I don't know, for allergies or something like that. Something, but to me, I think there's a place for both, right? If you're able to have this, and then you're able to know what their possible alternatives are if you come against something. And so that's yeah, I'll stop there. But yeah, I think everything that you guys have said so far has been like spot on.
And
I
oh, sorry.
oh, sorry. Oh, I also want to add, there's a lot of stigma around being uneducated, like depending when you went to college or high school. And there's a lot of comparisons on like associating low education levels to being a Republican or like a MAGA. But statistics show that um minorities have the least education, and that's mostly because, because of challenges, certain restrictions that don't enable them to. Um, but we see time and time again, especially in these recent elections, Black people, Hispanic people are the one that are voting blue, which are like, I don't want to make the suggestion, but I
Mhm.
mean the implication, but if we're going to make these like claims like um, having a certain type of education makes you more knowledgeable on how to vote. Um, it certainly does not take having to know certain things or going to college to prove that you're a better voter than others.
Good
I
point.
like that you brought that up because a lot of times when you focus or you watch the media, whether that's on the news or like just on your phone, like social media, and you watch like public interviews, you can often see when they have conversations about, okay, well, why do you stand for this person or whose side, who are you voting for? Things like, I mean, even though you're not really supposed to ask, but who do you stand with the most? A lot of times when you see Republicans or some people just respond, they respond based off of how they're feeling and rather than responding based off of the facts that are presented or like and I know that that's happened a lot within even the last 10 years about who's been in and out of office. You can just tell who's really focused on like it's a lot of it is racism, like who's focused on who, keeping the racism into the United States because of power. Like a lot of people want to have a power, um, and they want to keep the structure in the United States, even though our economy constantly changes.
Yeah, I kind of want to like talk about what you were saying. Like, I totally agree. Like, just the whole like the females being like president or something like that. Like, there's that like when it comes to the votes and stuff about how they believe, or just even the I forgot who it is. It's someone that kind of like helps sway the votes or something, but not the swing places. But it's like they have this idea that only males can like lead things like that because when it comes to business, because they feel like, women will lead more with their emotions. And I feel like that kind of idea also is an issue in society, which also plays a role in like who we vote and like you were saying, how we go based off just not racism, but also just a mindset of I'll say ignorance and not actually looking at the facts instead of just thinking about like, oh, they look like they could be good in office, so I'm gonna put them in office instead of like, I see the potential that this person may have over this person, so let me at least try and be open to the idea of having other people in office, if that makes sense.
Even with not wanting women in office, even when there's men in office, sometimes you still face backlash because even though it wasn't too recent, but when Mom Donnie, the mayor of New York, came into office, he faced, I remember seeing on like TikTok, there was a whole bunch of conversation and controversy about how he was going to be I'm sorry, as mayor. And, because of his beliefs and what he stood for, a lot of people didn't agree. Well, not in New York, but like outside of New York, a lot of people just didn't necessarily agree. But I thought it was nice, at least just to bring a different perspective into the office for New York, and also to see how that reflects on other cities, how we can have it like the takeaway that we can get from him, or like just to see a person of color and another person of color in office is kind of empowering because you need, at least for younger people, you need to see that kind of reflection. Um, I'm sorry, that presentation on your screens and stuff like that. So
Yeah, I remember us talking about that last time, and I was saying how like with that whole even like outside, the people outside of New York that have an issue with it, the people inside of New York have an issue with it, and the issue is so bad that they have decided that they just want to leave New York because he's the mayor. And I feel like, that's very like, I mean, I don't
it's
think
ignorant.
it's,
It's
yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm like, I don't know if it's like that serious. Like, okay, like if that's the case, then I'm gonna just leave the US. If we all doing that, like that doesn't make sense. But yeah, I just wanted to say.
I'm also glad that you guys brought up the Mamdani election because I feel like it was an interesting case study in like what I guess political advertising is going to look like for this generation. Because I feel like it's so rare that we see, and I guess Mamdani isn't like a third party candidate, but like when you look at who he was running against, he kind of was like he was a democratic socialist. And so it was really interesting to see how he campaigned because I feel like the US kind of has a history of thinking like young people don't care about politics, young people aren't going to vote. And like, although that's true, like old people are, or sorry, older people are the main ones getting out to the polls. I think Mom Donnie recognized that Gen Z are like a they are a critical age group. A lot of us are coming of age and can vote in elections, and a lot of us are like very deeply interested in politics. So I think he did a very good job of specifically pandering to Gen Z, and especially for New York City, a city like that where it's like a revolving door of young people, if that makes sense, is like new people immigrate or new people are coming there and going to college there, and people are leaving, like older people leaving to go to the suburbs. I think his campaign strategy was really effective, and I think it kind of serves as a blueprint maybe to how local governmental candidates are going to start marketing to Gen Z in the future, perhaps.
No, I definitely agree because I recently read the Kamala Harris book, and a lot of it's talked about her marketing strategies and reaching out to younger people in order for us to vote. And I would say I would have to agree, and I like that. I liked how she did it. Like, I like how it was all strategic because remember, it was like the Bratz theme from Charlie XCX, like her recent album. And I just thought like that with, like you said, like with upcoming politics or like politicians trying to reach out to younger communities, they're gonna have to adjust media wise because a lot of people that are in our age group sometimes they don't go the extra distance to educate themselves about who's going to be in office or what's going on, but if they see it in the media because everyone is attached to their phones now, if they see it in the media and it appeals to them, if I'm being honest, it has to be within the first 30 seconds because the another problem is attention spans, which is a whole different conversation. But um yeah, it's just different tactics that you have to, and then access to like polling sites and stuff, because even on campus, I mean, it's relatively close for our campus when vote or yeah, when it was election season. But for other students, the access it's not so close, like, and then that kind of makes people not want to vote, like go out, especially if you don't have a car, like some people just don't want to take that extra step and go to whatever nearest school there is to vote. And then even to think about who you're voting for, um, it kind of hinders because there's like a lot of false information that students will receive, like, oh, you're gonna not get financial aid, or it is stuff like that. When it comes to like the politician, that's like, well, maybe I don't want to vote for this person, but I don't want to vote for this person. So it's like you're kind of in between. I know that didn't make sense. It was a lot of word jumble, but
But you
yeah.
said something, and I want to ask you as a question. It's going to be a quick question. Is to all of you. Take your time in responding to it. But Dara, you just said something. Everything was in this. You said, I'm either vote for this person or this person. So, what are the since we're talking about some of the flaws? What do you think about the fact that in the United States you're limited to two candidates, right? There are other parties and people that have great ideas, and we're not trying to force. No one should be feel like they're forced to vote for anybody.
Hmm.
You also should not be limited to, in terms of you shouldn't be limited in terms of the candidates that are out there and whose ideas are out there. Like, okay, you're going to be limited to blue or red, Democrat or Republican, and um, I think that information should be presented. Candidates and the ideas they have should be presented in a very democratic manner, and let the electorate make the decision who they want to vote for, what party, what platform, what referendum they want to vote for, based on what's important to them, what is important to their community, and so forth. But when you restrict, when they restrict candidates and ideas, I mean, for goodness sakes, I mean, you wouldn't even think that there's a Green Party out there, or there's a Libertarian Party out there, because they're not allowed to get on the debate stage. And so I wanted to ask you, what do you guys think about that? Because to me, that is a restriction. That's not true democracy. True democracy is, I mean, when I traveled like several years ago, like to Scandinavia, and you go to those countries, I mean, they have several candidates from several different parties vying for the population's votes, those that are eligible to vote. Several. And I had conversations. I said, in the United States, I said I said that the corporate media and these corporate parties, they go out of their way to restrict voters from potentially knowing about the ideas and the platforms that exist outside of that two-party duopoly. So what do you guys think about that, honestly?
I definitely think that's a restriction because I feel like, well, yes, in the United States, we're a big two-party country, but like there are independent parties. There's the Green Party, and then you said the Liberation Party. But a
Libertarian.
lot of times when, I'm sorry, Libertarian Party. But a lot of times, even when, they go out and wow, I'm having brain. Um, when they advocate for themselves, you don't see that, or it's kind of hidden in the media, or it's just not shown as much. And I actually remember somebody from the Green Party came to UMD a few years ago, but a lot of times when you don't know about something, you kind of ignore it if you don't want, if that's not something of interest. So I think it's really restricting because corporations, they don't want you to see that. They want you to only focus on those big two. And if you don't, and let's say you branch out, it's not even branching out that far, you're just branching out to what you believe. It's like, well, your vote doesn't count. Like that's what I've heard. And that's not always true. So
Thanks. Yeah, good points. Anybody else?
I mean, this like two-party system has kind of been a problem since the beginning of America. Like one of the last things George Washington said before like he pieced out and stepped down from being president was that warring factions would basically be the destruction of this nation. And that was really prophetic because what we see now is we have two warring factions, Democrats, Republicans, and because there's there's some such polarization in our democracy, we really can't get anything done. And so like I really resonate with what was just being said about like voting independent and especially in this past presidential election. Like I feel like independents were a lot of them were blamed for like Kamala's loss because it was splitting the Democratic vote. And while that is true to an extent, I just feel like elections can really be like a really big tragedy of commons where I feel like a lot of people would like support the policies of independence, but they don't want to vote independent because they think their vote isn't going to count. So I feel like that's kind of the more insidious nature of the two-party system. And besides it just being bad, I also think it's really lazy just because with this system, it's like vote red, vote blue, but you're not really looking at maybe individual candidates' policies. So and
Yeah.
especially like I've seen a lot of stuff, like for example, I've seen videos where Bernie will go and talk to like a rural Republican population and he'll talk to them about like affordability and then they realize that actually they basically have the same politics, same thing. There was I think like it was like a little I guess op-ed kind of video doc type of thing about people who had voted red in the presidential election, but who lived in New York City and then voted for Mamdani. So really, it's this really polarizing issue of affordability. So I think the two-party system kind of can mask the views of like specific politicians because you can't get over their political party.
Yeah. Do you have a microphone next to you, Jasmine?
Oh, do I? No, I think it's my
No,
headphones.
so you could drop it. That was a mic drop
Oh,
moment right there. And the reason I say that is that the reason I say that is you alluded to it. I think one of the worst things, one of the most repugnant things that that you hear all these election cycles when people try to shame people because they decide to vote outside of either party, and they say, oh, third party voters are the reason the Republicans lost, or the reason that the Democrats lost. You wouldn't see that. So they're vying, they're vying for votes. So you wouldn't say that with if it was AT&T and Verizon, right? And then Sprint or T-Mobile comes out and said, "Oh, you're the reason you're the reason we lost." No, if you want my vote, if you want my vote, then you've got to earn it. And you alluded to it when you mentioned, Bernie going and trying to ingratiate himself by exposing, you know, um, people who have systematically throughout their lives been Republican voters, and trying to explain to them what they would have to gain in a day-to-day in their day-to-day lives by exploring this as an option. That's what you go out and do. If I'm a business, I mean, think about it. If I'm a why would I go? Oh my gosh, you took my business because you presented a product that that was better than mine, or that appealed to my customers better. Like, you can't, that's not going to work. And so in voting, unless it's not a democracy, unless people are supposed to be held by a gun, but if you really believe in democracy, you can't go and blame somebody for voting a way that after they have done their due diligence and said, damn, this candidate or this political party, their platform appeals much more to me. And I'm going to vote my conscience. I'm not going to vote because the corporate media tells me to, or my neighbor tells me to, or my relative tells me to. I'm going to vote my conscience based on the fact that I did my due diligence, because some of those people that historically vote for one of those two corporate parties, oftentimes they don't do their diligence. They just vote because they've been told. It's been kind of like, as what's the as wealth is passed down, and kind of poverty sometimes gets passed down, and sometimes voting trends get passed down. Oh, my grandma voted this way, and my pappy, he voted this way, so I've got to vote this way, without them actually ever looking into it and saying, does this mesh with how I'm living my life, and what I want out of my community, and what I want in 2026 and beyond. So I thought you were spot on. Anybody else? Jolita, go on.
Uh, yeah, so I was gonna kind of like agree with what everybody was saying, and just how like kind of stay how like we were saying, like the media, it's very like agenda setting, meaning that they're very biased about who they want to show, because they know that if they were to show these other candidates, that the chances of the votes being between the Democrat and Republican is going to be very like, it's not going to be the same. And it's also about sponsorship too. And I feel like sometimes a lot of the third party candidates don't have big sponsors or like donors that even want to represent them, because they're so tailored towards these Democrats and Republicans. And I had seen something that also talked about doing ranked choice voting, which means like the candidates, like, well, voters will be able to rank the candidates that in order of like what they preferred. And it will allow those third parties to even at least get a chance to be up there. And from that, the candidates with the fewer votes will be, eliminated, but the second choice voters, they'll still be counted, if that makes sense. So it'll just give like a broader support system for them to win. And just, yeah, but I feel like also Gen Z also has a big impact on how these candidates can be put out there, because we're very influential. And just us, like, we can talk about everything that's going on in the world, and if we give these parties a spotlight, even like the influencers that are on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, whatever streams and stuff like that, I feel like it would open the eyes up to other people, because like you said, it's like people feel like, okay, well, since this person vote for them, I'm gonna vote for them too. And if we have a very big influence on people, then I feel like that could, play a part of just helping those candidates get their message out.
Oh, and then I also want to expand on this like constraint of like two-party system. Um, this two-party system makes politics in America look really simple, but it's really not. When we look at like the third party, we usually see them as just like people who bring in new ideas and nothing else. And also, a lot of these politicians don't really represent the interests of said state. Like recently, the SAVE Act, we had 5 Democrats who voted for the SAVE Act in the House.
Yeah. Yep.
So, yeah, the SAVE Act, which literally could be so detrimental to
Yeah.
Hispanic and Black voters who have to get all this proper documentation, some of which they don't even have, and it takes time. And then we have all these people coming all at once, and they might not even have the chance to vote in this upcoming midterm. Um, so, there's that. And also, another thing I would just want to put in the air, we have a lot of like discussion around like Gen Z voting, and then encouraging Gen Z voters to vote. Um, should we make voting a mandatory thing along with the education that comes with it? Like I know there's Australia. I just want to put that in the air because I just thought it was like, even like me and myself like on this discussion about like having Gen Z to vote, it kind of made me curious. So,
I
Thank
kind of
you.
think so. Like to answer your question, should voting be mandatory? Absolutely. And I feel that way because I think it is important the earlier you can start to educate yourself about politics or who's in office, I feel like that's best simply because that the economy that we're growing into, that's kind of what you have to it affects everything you do, whether you want it to or not. Like it affects schooling or groceries or gas. Like who you vote for will affect your day-to-day life. So as long as you're educated about it and you're able to have a voice and speak about your opinion, I feel like you should do so.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else as we like there's tons of great points you guys have all brought up. Any closing comments for you guys? And well, actually, this is a great closing comment. I wanted to ask you guys what potential remedies can you see um that could alter the trajectory that things are on? Whether it's 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line. Sometimes these things take a bit of time, and oftentimes it comes from obviously folks boots on the ground organizing um, within their PACs or super PACs or just even grassroots organizing, getting on the street and letting their local as well as their national um, um, politicians know how they feel and being consistent about it. I mean, that to me, that's one viable remedy because when people organize and they organize consistently and they almost become like I don't want to say like a nuisance, but they're always in the ears and the minds and the eyes of the politicians that are supposed to be representing them. They understand like, listen, if I don't carry the weight or carry the weight of my constituents' concerns into Washington or into the state house, then my job may be up. And these things, that's how these things happen. They start, so I don't know what you guys think. What do you guys think for solutions?
um, so this is like a rough idea. It's not really established here, there, and there. Honestly, I've considered winner take all system, but I don't think that's gonna benefit anyone ex unless you're like white. Um, I think we could repurpose the electoral system. In the beginning, it was used to benefit like farmers, smaller states. But that America then is not the America now. We have a lot of immigrants who came here, a lot of minorities. We're now in a state where we can consider Black people, Hispanic, such and such. So I think if we repurpose the electoral system to be demographic or maybe like gender or race wise, it could be an idea.
Right on. Who's next? Any solutions? That was good.
Oh, okay. Well, I had, stated earlier, like the national popular vote, which is just having everybody vote individually, no swinging states having majority of the votes. And then the ranked choice voting, which is when they just vote in kind of like their preference of who they want to be in office. And they just choose from there the common votes.
Good. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like those.
I feel like this is a hard topic because the two-party system is so ingrained in the US. And like, I don't know that we'll see a presidential candidate be like an independent party or a smaller party or like more of like a socialist. I don't know if we'll see that for the next like 20 or 40 years or maybe even in our lifetimes. But I feel like what you can do, and like to mention like the New York mayoral race again, is to support like these independent candidates within your own local communities. I even think there's like um, a Democratic Socialist candidate running right now for, I believe, DC mayor. So we'll see how that goes. But basically, I think starting at a local level, and I think as time goes on, the way our economy is going, I could probably see workers' parties coming up again. The way environmental systems going, I could see more people joining the Green Party. So I think as time goes on, hopefully these independent parties will garner more support at the local levels and people will see them as a viable option. And then maybe there could be more diversity of choice in presidential options. But again, I don't even know if this is something that we would even see in our lifetime.
Yeah.
And then I think to focus and sponsor like independent parties, that way you're not so held down to just the a Republican or Democratic Party. And then I also agree with all the other ladies what they were saying, like repurpose the electoral votes and focus, um, just kind of switch around the popular votes too.
Yeah. And think about it. You guys all had brilliant analysis and suggestions. And think about it. Competition is right. It's supposed to be good, right? Like you don't see you see all these like fast food places now. Some of them like start to employ more vegetarian or vegan options, right? And that's because somebody came out and had it and like, oh gosh, in order to keep up with them and to compete, we've got to do this. When if we only had one, imagine if we only had two cell phone companies, do you know how high the rates would be? The rates lower when there's competition because they know they have to go out there and they have to vie. They have to do what they can to compete for your business. Oh, look, we'll take on we'll pay off your old bill if you come over to us. We'll pay that bill off. Well, oh, we'll give you a free Android phone or a free iPhone if you come on over to us. So they're always constantly trying to tinker that. And I think with the same thing should be with politics. Like you've got to go out there. I know that certainly if I was running for political office, like I would feel some type of obligation to go out there and to campaign on a platform that I'm presenting things in a way that are different than the incumbent or whoever my predecessor was. And then on top of that, when you campaign on that, you've got to stand 10 toes down on that. When you get in, if you get into office, you should feel doubly compelled to actually respond to what your campaign promises were with actions, respond with actions, holding them to account, really holding candidates and political parties to account. Dara, it looks like you have something you wanted to say.
No, no, no. I was just agreeing. In my head, I was thinking about how competition is good for growth because it helps people explore your differences and allows them to understand like how your one party may be more beneficial to what your beliefs are than another one. That's all.
Right. Right on. Right on. This was absolutely fantastic. Folks that are watching, we're heading into spring break. So we have a bit of a respite, next week because, we're going into spring break, but I thought this was fantastic. And I just want to also say that the idea for this show completely came from, the co-host. We had a great production session last week, and there are a lot of ideas that were thrown around, and those ideas for shows that we don't have today are going to be in subsequent shows. But we kind of all agreed after Jasmine, mentioned voting. Oh, that would be a good topic. But this is fantastic, and I can't be more proud of all of you guys, and I'm just like in the midst of greatness. Like you guys are like doing some amazing stuff, and you've taken over the show rightfully so, and so I applaud you guys. um uh Jolita, Dara, Jasmine, Elizabeth, and Tiana, couldn't be on, and Christina, but they're, also the, co-hosts. Just want to salute you all, and hope you all have a safe and restful spring break. And everyone that's watching, thank you for your continued support. I see how our numbers continue to climb, so please continue to subscribe to the channel and continue to watch. I'm Solomon, and on behalf of my brilliant co-hosts. You've been watching Liberated Perspectives on the Unite TV Media on Nimburu's Media Collective. Until next time, peace.